Hey everyone, my name is Vanessa. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's October 8th, 2017. And today I want to start to try to do a series called Keep It Simple, Daily Meditations for 12-Step Beginnings and Renewal. My dear friend, my pal, Sam got this for me. And so I've been reading it in the mornings as part of my prayer and meditation and kind of reflecting on it. And I feel like maybe we can do a series on this and see how far I get into the month. I love December, by the way. December is my favorite month of the entire year. It's my birthday this month, and there's Christmas and New Year's, and everything is so pretty and sparkly and shiny, and I get really excited this month. Yeah. There's also something about Mercury retrograde until 15th or something, but that doesn't matter because it's December, okay? Let's go ahead and jump into this. And for December, I guess the step is is the 12th step. So having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So for the next few days, we're going to really break down this step and go into each one. And by breaking it down, reflecting on it in a very short sentence. And then I will tell you about my experience and then encourage you to share in the comments what your experience has been or how it sounds, or if you're curious about the 12 steps, or if that sounds dumb and that's why you're not doing the 12 steps, if you're not, so etc. Okay, December 1st, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So this is the first part of step 12. We are awake. Our spirits are alive. We are part of the world. Our addiction no longer clouds our vision. How? Step 12 answers this. The beauty of step 12 is that if we feel our spirits starting to go dead, we know how to awaken them. It's simple. Turn to the steps. After all, working the steps has awakened our spirits. The hope and serenity we feel are gifts given to us through the steps of our program, and the more we turn to the steps for help, the more life we'll feel. The steps are what feed and heal our souls. Prayer for the day. Higher power, thank you for the steps. If I start to believe it is I who keeps me sober, remind me of my life before the 12 steps. Action for the day. Today I'll read the 12 steps. I'll think of how each step helped awaken my spirit. All right, so this is a good one. A couple of thoughts off the bat is I do love that they are separating this line by line, because step 12 does have, it's multifaceted and there's numerous things that we need to look at when considering this step. But I do love this awakening. I believe that the original text said experience. I always get this flipped up. So the original text said having had a spiritual experience, but people were doing the work and they didn't know if they were getting, addicts and alcoholics are always going to be comparing notes. They're always going to be like, is that the experience? Was this strong enough experience for me to classify? And language is pretty important, but people were asking Bill Wilson about it. And they're like, did this count as an experience? Did I have it? And it's just an awakening. You're becoming awakened to this. And so he ended up, and actually, I think the original text is awakening. And so they didn't know if they were awakened enough. So then he changed to experience. And then he lamented later on in his life that he wished he hadn't changed that verbiage because it was right the first time. We are awakened. We are having this experience, but some of that gets watered down as people try to compare notes and people think, are we doing it right or whatever? Language is pretty important. Here we are, though, we are awake. And I love Mark Houston, what he says. It's like, before we go through the 12 steps and before we have this awakening, we are just asleep, dreaming that we are awake. And that is exactly how I felt for so much of my life. I just genuinely felt like I was dreaming of being awake, dreaming of being in my life, dreaming of being present. And I never really was. I was trying my best. I had so many fears and anxieties, and I was just so self-conscious and self-centered and selfish in the term related to fear, in that like I was just constantly always looking out for myself only and always, that I found it really hard to be present and awake to what this life actually is, and connection and meaningful bonds to community or to family or to friends or to myself and to my higher power and God. And I'm just going to say God because higher power is a very long word, and I think you guys know what I mean when I say it. So When I first had my spiritual awakening, my first experience through the 12 steps, I became addicted to that, you guys. When I say I'm an addict through and through, I really can be. It is just a way that I'm wired, unfortunately, fortunately. And I now can keep it in check way better than I could before. But when I was first going through the steps, I did the steps compulsively for the first year and a half or so. And then somebody in the community was like, Vanessa, I think you need to stop doing the steps and actually take someone through the steps. Like that's what's going to keep you sober. And it's true. Being in recovery is not just knowing what the 12 steps are or just having done them. It's actually taking other women or men through the work. And so that the 12 step is crucial to long-term sobriety. It's being able to be of service to others, being able to help others by sharing your experience, and being able to see that own transformation within the person that you're helping. And that honestly, since I got sober, I've usually had about 3 sponsees at a time, all the time, except for the 1 year that I took off, and except for right now, because I'm going through the steps myself finally again after so many years. Yeah, and there is something about that. Working with other women has kept me sober through some incredibly tragic and chaotic times in my life, like real events and things that were happening, and just like my own emotional turmoil that I was creating. Working with other women has always grounded me, has always helped me. If you're struggling ever, if you were my sponsee, I would tell you go get out of yourself and help someone else. It feels like it's the last thing that you want to do, and that's typically how you know it's the best thing for you. It's the last thing you want to do. So I love this enthusiasm though, and how it starts off like we are awake, and it's like we are awake. Birds, when they chirp really early in the mornings, I know there's all these memes about how loud and annoying they are, and don't they know we just want to sleep. When birds are calling to each other and just singing so damn loud, like at the crack of dawn, it is because they are signaling to other birds that they survived the night. There is a lot of opportunity for a little bird to get eaten up in the middle of the night and to not wake up the next morning. And so when they awaken, they instinctually begin to sing, again, as a signaling and to check, almost like a roll call. And I think how beautiful that is. And I feel as we begin to awaken, it's also, okay, who else is here with me? Who else is here? And when we are around people whose spirits are starting to go dead, or whose spirits are dead, or they're in this place of hopelessness, like that's our cue. That's where we go in and we get to help people if we've been helped, right? Like we get to spread this message of hope. And what a gift that is. And it's that beautiful cycle. And then when they get recovered, they get to go and help other people now. And I actually make that a term, like a condition for working with me, is that if I'm going to lead a woman through the steps, she needs to commit to taking other women through the work, because me taking her through steps is not going to keep her sober. Her working with other women is what's going to keep her sober. So I try to keep that, I set that expectation from the get-go. And so the miracle of the steps is that when you go through them, you will have an experience, you will have an awakening. And the reason for this is because you're connecting to this higher power, you're connecting to this God, you're connecting to this spirit that is greater than yourself, and therefore greater than your addiction, greater than your problems. And that to me was like life-giving. Like I needed to know that alcohol, like I literally had, I just remember so clearly thinking, my entire life has been run and ruined by a liquid in a bottle. How? And clearly that was just a symptom of much deeper problems that I have. So it's, yeah, I got to take care of that. I got to clear out and get sober. But now that we have some distance from the addiction, we can still jump right back into the 12 steps and get more freedom. So typically, and I do really feel like I wish on a global level there was some way, without making it a religion, that people can want to know how to exist on this spiritual basis. People think that they're doing that by going to church or by saying a prayer. And I'm not knocking that. That's still in some ways, as long as it's not causing harm to others or keeping them separated from others, it's a good starting point. But there's more work that needs to be done. And part of that is knowing that there is this greater, all-loving, all-knowing power that's watching out for us. 2, that we're worthy of it, right? 3, that we can be okay regardless of our circumstances with this power there. And also that we need to reflect on why we think it's not. And that's what the fourth step inventory is. Why do we think this power doesn't love us? It's because this person treated me badly. It's because I treated that person badly. It's because all of this shame, all of this guilt, all of these fears. And as going through the step work, you get to really face and be rid of all of those things. And then you're just left with, you get to strip yourself of all of those false narratives and all of those fears and plant yourself firmly in the identity of being beloved, right? And being special and worthy and deserving of love and goodness. In addition to that, then we get to also take action. And now we have the ability to actually correct any of that. We need to just not just ponder, yeah, I could have done that better. We need to go back and make it right to the best of our abilities. And even if we're not able to make it right, our own willingness to want to make things right changes the DNA of our soul. I promise you, something in just the willingness to want to set things correct and make amends to people will, I know I have sponsees who are like, this person will not take my call, they won't meet with me for an amends. And I'm like, but you tried. I always say make 3 attempts first and try to see them in person. If you can't, at least you were ready. And if that person ever turns around and is like, all right, I'm ready to hear it, then you'll be ready. You already know, you've already released, you've already done the hard work of reflecting on what happened and getting really honest with yourself and thinking and knowing and feeling that this resentment, this thing, it doesn't actually define you after all. And then we get to sit in that and get connected to this power that led us through the steps in steps 10 and 11. We get to reflect now on a daily basis. What is our life looking like? Are we slipping back into old habits? Are we slipping into old fears? Or are we really relying and depending on this greater power that we committed to, that we agreed to letting take care of us? And so step 12, we get to share this entire experience with other people. And so it is really crucial to maintaining sobriety. And I'm not saying that everybody who has sponsees stays sober, but everyone who has had a spiritual experience tends to have a better chance of recovery if they're willing to continue to practice all of these steps in all of their affairs. Now, something that irks me a little bit about this reflection, and I'll be really honest, is that it does still go beyond the addiction, right? So the prayer for the day, if I start to believe it is I who keeps me sober, I can't say I don't think about drinking. That has been completely removed from me. And I feel like when you've had this psychic change, when you've had this spiritual experience, the drugs and alcohol are not what you want to default to when you are spiritually connected and when you are in stress. Like when I am stressed, those are not the things that I'm defaulting to. When things are chaotic, when I went through all that grief, I did not ever think about drinking. Thank God. That is a miracle of God. Somebody who could not even wake up in the morning without drinking suddenly is in probably one of the worst phases of her life, and she doesn't feel like drinking. The thought never even crossed my mind. But the reality is I had a lot of other destructive behaviors. I was isolating. I was emotionally just guarded. I was really blocked from myself and from God. And it was all in a measure to protect myself from further harm, but it was all keeping me separated from other people. And that actually is really what puts me in danger of relapse, is when I feel disconnected from other people and from community and from God. And when I was in my depression, luckily I had enough of a substance, enough of a foundation in God where it didn't get to the point of desperation where it could have in the past. And so that's probably why the thought of drinking didn't come to me. But again, I had these other behaviors that I was still battling. I became a workaholic, a shopaholic. I began to overeat. I began to undereat. I began to overeat. I began to become a liar. By liar, I would just like flake on people all of the time. And this is actually something that I'm still trying to unlearn from that period in my life, which is 2 years ago. And so all of that, and just keeping people at like arm's length because I was so afraid of losing them, right? Because the grief was so heavy that it kept me separated. And that there came a point where I was like, I need to let this go and give it to God. And I have, and I've stayed sober, but I think that it's short-sighted to say that it's just me who keeps me sober. It's just me who keeps me sane. Yeah, like I don't even keep myself sane most of the days. I have to really, when I start to feel myself spiraling, I need to really connect to this God who I know is going to catch me either way. Even if things don't go the way that I want them to go, I'm going to be okay. And it's really important to me to emphasize that with people who are in recovery, because it is not just about the drugs and the alcohol or the acting out. It is about how we are feeling internally. Are we still feeling really anxious? What is our emotional nature, right? Are we still blowing up on people? Are we still are we racking up a whole new list of offenses of like people we're going to need to make amends to? And you know what? It happens, but do we have the willingness and the honesty to see that and to face it and then to take action on it? And I also love the action. I'll read the 12 steps and I'll think about how each step helped to awaken my spirit. That is so important. I do appreciate every single step and and even in going through, I just finished the mystical sobriety course with James Finley, and just going through that whole experience and going through the 12 steps with a different lens, with this more mystical tint to it, it really did change my perspective on how the 12 steps have impacted me and how they actually work. Again, I just can't say enough about, if you haven't, have you done the 12 steps? Let me know in the comments. And no, it's fine if you haven't. I just really do feel like, even as an example, so last year I went to the Red Letter Christians retreat, and I was in this room full of like amazing, really inspirational, powerful, like magnetic, influential activists and academics. And these people were writing books and creating movements, and all for tackling racial injustice and sexism and inequality, disparity, poor, all of these very important, the death penalty, all these really important things. And one of the speakers who had gone up, who was extremely powerful, he was like, if we could find some way to get us all on the same page, we could have heaven on earth. And where we can put not just our differences aside, but almost like embrace them, right? And make that part of what makes us stronger. And I remember thinking like, oh, that reminds me a lot of my recovery community, because I can be in a room with people of all different addictions. And in all those differences, we are still so much alike. We're still seeing that we'll lie when we're scared. We will manipulate when we feel out of control. Like, we'll still find these patterns. I have so much in common with the codependent. I have so much in common with, and all of this, the underlying thing is that we're all on the brink of death, basically. Like, we're all spiritually dead or asleep when we are not conscious and connected to this higher power. And if we let our differences in the rooms separate us from helping somebody else, if I was like, I'm only going to sponsor Christian women, that's really harmful to the community, actually. And that's really harmful to me too. If I say I'm not going to sponsor anyone in the LGBTQ community, like, that's really harmful. I need to be able to put those things aside and really reflect on what is the common problem and what is our solution. And so he was talking about that, and I was like, okay, we have that in the rooms. How do we make this a bigger thing then? Because we do all have resentments in society and in cultures, and we do all need to make amends in some way or another. The hard part is a lot of people in our society right now are scared, and they don't have the hopefulness or a connection to something greater than themselves. They make everything else on this earth greater than themselves. They make the politicians, they make the stock market, they make their jobs, they make their worries greater than themselves. And if we could all find the commonality in our struggle, and if we as a society could just be like, hey, we're all in struggle mode right now, even though I look like I'm like really successful or doing whatever, I'm still struggling, and I really need community to help me through this. If we could be that honest, and we could be, okay, not only is community going to help, there's actually a greater purpose behind us all, that could also help. And now we have this solution. Is that me and my over optimism? Probably. But I feel like at some point, maybe as things get more desperate, we will cling to new solutions with the desperation of a drowning man, essentially. That's all I got. I will read the prayer for the day one more time for you. Higher power, thank you for the steps. If I start to believe it is I who keeps me sober, remind me of my life before the 12 steps. Action for the day. Today, I'll read the 12 steps. I'll think of how each step helped awaken my spirit. So I hope that this was helpful. If you got this far, let me know what your sobriety date is. I would love to cheer for you and encourage you. And thanks again for joining me on this video. Okay, thanks. Bye.